Welcome to Tech London, a show featuring interviews with London's top creative entrepreneurs, startups, investors, design agencies, internet marketers, and freelancers that make up the Tech London online community, which mostly lives on the Slack instant messaging platform. We rotate through both hosts and guests for these interviews, so you have the chance to hear from multiple perspectives on London's tech scene.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Tech London podcast. This week, we have Celso Pinto in the studio. Celso is a Portuguese expat in London since 2012, and he's the founder of usepixie.com, a product for small accountancy teams. Primarily, he's passionate about all things product. He has a diverse track record working in executive management teams from the early stages of opportunity research to growing the companies as well. Welcome, Celso, to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
Yeah, so I guess since this is the Tech London podcast, everybody wants to hear how you ended up in London. What's your London story?
Oh boy, it's a very long one. So I moved in for the first time to London in April 2000. So coming from Lisbon is great, but it's also a very small town, and the market there isn't very dynamic. Now it's a bit more, but still, I was kind of like just more eager to work in a more dynamic environment. And, in the 20s, obviously, the biggest capital we have here in Europe is London. So there's always that attraction. And that brought me here for the first time in 2000. I actually ended up going back home in the same year, mostly because of the dot-com crash that hit the UK really, really hard. And I had a really good offer to go back to Lisbon for a mobile software company. And I just ended up taking that offer. Anyways, fast forward a few years, I was working on a product called Simple Tax in Portugal with tax filing. We're looking into a bigger market. We're also talking to investors about growing the business. And that kind of led us to come to the UK with a product and the business. We ended up being selected to participate in Seed Camp back in 2012. And that's really what prompted me to move here. It didn't make sense to run a product like that from outside. So just settled here permanently and very, very happily, if I may say so.
Awesome. So your introduction to tech was since the pre-dot-com in 2000. Did you come into tech as a technical person or a product manager?
Yeah, no, I started my career back in 98 as a software developer. I carried on doing that work until about 2009, give or take. So then in 2009, I had this opportunity to transition into more product type roles. I was really, really keen about it as well. I just been out of a tough period and just fell out of love with technology at the time. So just being able to leave, that nitty-gritty of technology, looking more into product, interacting with people, which sounded really, really interesting to me. So I ended up making that transition over the 2009-2010 period. And since then, I've been mostly working either on product or in operations.
Yeah, it makes sense. It feels like, especially nowadays, getting into technology from the software development side of things, it's such a low barrier. But once you get going and you start working on a few projects, you end up gaining these other skills, So it's like building that foundation and then working your way up the org chart, whereas you can't really do that the other way around. So I feel like it's a special place where you have product managers with a technical background and a history in software development. I feel it gives you a bit of a superpower. Is that right?
It helps. It definitely helps to having conversations with engineers to immediately have a good understanding of what the trade-offs that they're speaking about are. Obviously, with enough time and conversation and learnings, this, I'm sure, will be, anyone can learn those things. But again, it just creates a different kind of empathy right away with the software engineers, with the engineering teams. And it definitely helps. It's not a requirement per se, but I've definitely encouraged, even now, I don't shy away from doing code if necessary. Again, I'm not by far up to date with all the modern stuff, but Yeah, as long as you know the fundamentals, as long as you have a good understanding of what the trade-offs are of this decision versus that decision, engineers, they need to run the show. They need to let us know exactly how things should be getting built. But then just having an understanding for what that actually means is really, really helpful. So I definitely encourage anyone, if you're coming into product management from a design perspective, from a design background, or from sometimes even marketing background and support background, I definitely encourage to go into one of those kind of like boot camp style courses just to get like understand the fundamentals of web development, modern development, and stuff like that. That's really helpful, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a good skill to have in your back pocket whenever you want to like mock up something. So Use Pixie is a software for small accounting firms to keep up to date with their clients and provide reminders. And also, I'm sure it does a lot of other things. What was the first version of that you felt was ready for the world? How did that look?
Yeah,
was it perfect?
Oh boy, sure. Okay. Well, okay. So first version wasn't that much different. I mean, there are definitely differences, but the fundamentals stayed pretty much the same. So we adopted a set of principles around the product at the time that we understood to be the principles that guided our customers towards using the product and being successful with it. So simplicity is one of those, for example. And even now, having those principles in place really helps to steer the decisions around the product on whether or not to pursue certain features that are going to be super complex for about 80% of our customers or 90% of our customers. So do we really want to do it in that way? Perhaps not. But sometimes it helps close sales. So there's always that, it's good to have those guidelines to help make those decisions. In any case, so going back to the product itself, some of the fundamentals were pretty much the same, but other things just really changed drastically once we started to realize and getting the feedback in that the workflows weren't as streamlined as folks were expecting them to be, if that makes sense. So it wasn't such as, we understood very early, like what would be the fundamental features that the product would need to have, like table stake features, or for us to even join the conversation in terms of being a valid alternative for accountants. So once that was out of the way and we had that understanding, then what differs really is how do we design these features? And, when you're operating with feedback, let's say from 5-10 people, it's one thing. When you're operating from feedback from 500 to 1,000 people, it's like a completely different ballgame. Because now the feedback that you get, or rather we get more exposure to different ways of using the product, if that makes sense. So the workflows that we envision for 5 people aren't going to work for everyone inevitably. So having that feedback loop there was really, really useful. So whereas from a design perspective, from a foundational perspective, it kind of stays the same. The workflows they've been and constantly keep streamlining them just to make sure that things are easy to, our work is easy to get done in our product, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And in terms of the difficult decisions you have to make in terms of giving a customer what they want versus not giving them what they want, what's one product feature that at the time didn't make sense for the small amount of people that it would benefit versus now? Is there something that they've been asking for that maybe makes sense now to implement? And can you give us an example of such a feature and like what was the cost and benefit analysis?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I can give you two examples. One of them is something that we're working on right now, which is e-signing of documents. We're working with a small subset of customers. No one comes from Pixie from scratch, okay? Or rather, right now we're seeing more of that, but typically the customers that come into Pixie, they've been running their own business for a while now. So they have ways to get documents signed and things like that. And we resisted for the longest time to have that feature into Pixie, very deliberately as well, because we thought, there are so many good products out there for document signing, why are we going to invest into creating something that's half-baked compared to all those feature sets? There's no chance that we have the same resources and we're able to dedicate the same resources as those guys that are doing that like full-time. And then we actually understood the workflow for getting documents signed and why it is so important to have that in a product like ours. So now we decided to make that investment from a resource perspective, and we're working to have that launch in the first quarter of the next year. So that's an example of something that we resisted not doing. But again, once we start getting more exposure to bigger firms, to other firms, we go, yeah, okay, this makes a lot of sense. So that was one. Another one is something that we get a lot from larger firms. And this is important because we know our customers. We know which kind of customer we want to attract. We are in the business of serving small businesses, small firms, 2 to 10 people. We have plenty of attention from larger firms as well that want a simple product to manage the workflows internally. However, the bigger firms tend to have more complex and more sophisticated workflows as well. And one of those workflows is just the ability to have team assignments, which is one task gets assigned to a team. And whenever someone from that team becomes available, they will deal with the task. In a small team of 5, this doesn't exist. Like, it's all hands on deck, generally, kind of like everyone does a bit of everything. In a team of 20, 50 people, this is definitely going to happen. So there's going to be like a small team of bookkeepers, a small team of payroll people, a small team of accountants that doing the tax prep. So this isn't a problem that we have for small teams and for our target customers. And we always get this from the bigger clients coming on board, going, look, we need this feature. We love the product, we love everything else, but we can't come on board without this feature. And one of the best positions for us right now is that obviously I'd love to work with those bigger firms just for the learning aspect of it, but it's not going to make a material difference for us. We're in a very fortunate position of being able to do this, which is to say, look, we're not going to invest in that. We prefer not to have it on board. It's not going to make any difference for us monetarily to have this firm. And again, this stems out from the fact that we kind of know which kind of customer we want to attract to begin with. We focus on that and delivering the features for those ones, which enables us to say no to the features from customers who are outside of those parameters. And so, yeah, hopefully these 2 cases are useful, but let me know what you think.
Yeah, I feel it makes sense because at a certain point, the firm becomes large enough where they have their own like legacy ERP or some other like monolithic system where you as I understand a single price point SaaS it wouldn't make sense to add this complication. First, it will confuse your existing customers because they'll be like, why do we need this? Some people, so when I think that as a firm grows, they can't really understand why a bigger firm would do something in such a way, and they'll cause confusion. So I think I feel like that's the right decision, especially if you're concentrating on 5 to 20 people teams. Is that what you said?
Yeah, 2 to 10.
2 to 10.
But yeah, it's similar.
A big part of your product is sending, or at least from the website, I'm not an accountant, so I haven't tried it, is enabling your clients to notify their clients of important dates and documents and stuff like that. I'm kind of going through this with my accountant now. I kind of have to remember to tell him that I need to do my accounts. Otherwise, he'll charge me £50 a month just to remind me. So communication is like a big part of the product. Do you see at the moment you're integrating with G Suite and Exchange and sending it through their email service, I'm guessing, and not through your own SendGrid account or whatever? How do you see the communication landscape changing in terms of your clients, the accountants, and with their clients?
Yeah,
I talk to my accountant. Like if there's documents, I email him, but he's on my WhatsApp,
Yeah.
And do you think about getting into that space of other means of communication like text or?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that in this space, accountants and accounting services, Folks have realized in the past few years that, the personal touch matters lots, more than anything, in fact. With that in mind, you see more and more accountants, for example, using Slack, setting up Slack for clients. Emails go out under the individual name. So instead of just being this abstract thing, email address from an entire firm, suddenly it's Mohammed at Pixie, for example. And that's just writing to me about my tax return. So those things really, really matter. And that's a big shift that I've seen happening over the past few years as well. It's a great thing. Okay, I think it's a great shift to make business relatable. And again, small accountants, they're very close to their customers. It's not like a big firm. Go to one of the, I wouldn't even say the big four, but because that's unimaginable. Like the people doing the work have nothing to do with the client whatsoever. They never see them. But even if you get to the top 100 accounting firms here in the UK, for example, there's I wouldn't say a bit disconnect. There's definitely a partner that looks after the client, etc. But the people doing the work, they rarely contact the client, or the client even knows who they are. It's to be expected. It's the way things scale, professional services. It's just the nature of the beast. But the smaller firms, it's completely opposite. They know everything about the clients. They know whether they're married, have kids, dog's birthday, dog's name, all of that stuff. So it's a more personal relationship. And I think that changing the communication to reflect that makes a lot of sense. And that's also one of the things that it's interesting you point out that the use case about the tax return, because it's super timely here in the UK. January is coming around. January is when the deadline for filing tax returns happens. And before starting Pixie, I spoke with a few hundred accountants. I spoke with a few hundred business owners as well, because I really wanted to have a good understanding of whether my case was a fluke. So I have to admit I've never had a really good relationship with accountants, because it always felt super transactional. And hey, it's the end of the quarter, fill out these things for me, and then set it by this deadline. I'm okay, great. So let's do this. And then whenever something's needed, you need to repeatedly chase it as a client. And what I realized is that there's lots that's lost in the inbox. So requests, if you send it to someone in the firm, that person might not be the one doing the work, but it's on their inbox. So if they don't forward because they're hundreds of their emails, the client gets the request, the client asks, and the client request gets lost. From an accountant's perspective, it's super challenging to manage client relationships. Someone like you, as you mentioned, you come around once a year to file a tax return. That's it. So you're not a very profitable client for an accountant. But, it's still money. So it's still a good client to have. So the challenge really was, okay, how can we give all clients the same level of service, regardless of how much money they bring and how often we do with them? There's definitely a standard. I don't know if you read this book called Score Takes Care of Itself by Bill Walsh. He was an NFL coach. And he used to have this thing called the standard of performance that he imputed into all of his teams. And this was a really good thing to have because, for example, he would deliberately give a checklist to the person picking up the phone. I think there's the San Francisco 49ers. And he would give him a checklist on how to answer the phone and how to correctly redirect a call to whatever the final destination would be. So anyways, having this sort of standard of performance for every single client is really important. Having the systems in place that automate this and just make sure that in your case, you don't need to chase the client. Why would the accountant? Why not? Because they would have, with Pixie, obviously, they would have had a task that started back in October that would have sent you an email to let you know, hey, the end of the year is coming around. Do you want to work with us again this year or not? And if so, these are the deadlines. Just write me an email to get the task started. You'd say, yes, I'm interested. They would go one click, create the task based on that, and we're off to the races. So it's really that sort of thing that we bank a lot, or that we focus a lot on in Pixie. So just those smaller relationship-driven communications, making sure that nothing gets lost, requests that get lost, deadlines don't get missed, etc. With these smaller automations without still forgetting about the personal touch. No one wants to get an email from a robot. So that's why Pixie sends the email on behalf of the accountant themselves. This is where that integration, as you mentioned, comes into play, right? Because the email comes in from a known email address, and from the email address of my accountant that I usually deal with. It looks like a plain text email, so it's something that someone wrote. And those things really, really matter. And there's definitely that trend of, just making business more personal, especially at the smaller side of business relationships. Again, this doesn't really apply for bigger firms. They have like different problems, different scale of problems. But for smaller firms, we're seeing that Pixie does make a difference on that front, and does allow the accountants to overcome that challenge of making communications more personable and managing all the client relationships in the same way.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with the importance of, the person-to-person contact with the accountants. I actually moved away from a famous mid-sized accountancy firm in London because it felt like I was being told by the principal to do my homework, and then they would charge me like a bomb, and and they would be like, I can just go to a local shop. I'll know the guy person to person. For me, as a developer who has a limited company and has all these like tax responsibilities, especially things that like I don't understand them. I need somebody who can talk to me person to person, and who I can like. Yeah. When as a founder, when you don't understand a part of your business, and obviously you can't understand everything 100%, there has to be that misunderstanding has to be replaced with trust. And you don't get that with a mid-sized firm where you're just like, like, sure, go away, So that's like, for me, I don't know, maybe this guy that I have doesn't know what he's doing, but I feel like he does. I feel like he's got my back, and that's what I'm paying for at the end of the day, and I have to accept that,
Yeah. No, definitely. And again, your experience is not that uncommon, I'm afraid. Unfortunately, it's not that uncommon. But again, I think that's where the smaller firms have room to win, if that makes sense. So in this space, there was a trend forming a few years back where the big accountancy providers, software providers, they're kind of like, it was a joke between myself and a few of us where, okay, when are they going to step in to kind of like take away that relationship between the accountants and the clients, so that they become kind of like the moderators, in the sense of if you need something done, you go on that platform, make a request, and then it's going to be fulfilled by the other side of the marketplace, which is from professional accountant. But you don't have that relationship, which you speak with software. Anyhow, fast forward a few years, that thing becomes a reality. Fast forward a few more years, and now we're seeing these firms kind of like toning down the voice a bit, because they suddenly realize that, at the small level, business is personal. So the idea of, going on websites and going, I want someone to file my VAT return. In theory, this is great, but in practice, this is horrible, because you want to file it, sure, but you also want to learn about it. You also want to have a bit of an understanding of what running that part of the business entails. So that's now, that's like what's happening right now. And those programs are getting kind of like toned down a bit. And eventually, they're going to get canceled, I would imagine. It's just really, really, really difficult to scale personal relationships with big organizations. It's really hard, especially in professional services. It's just impossible. The two are like in direct conflict. You cannot scale that and maintain a profitable business unless you scale the price, but then you price out all these smaller clients anyways. So you're kind of like in this constant struggle. And I think that the time is really good for smaller firms right now. I really, really do, especially with so much happening related to COVID and all the support that's coming out.
Totally. A lot of people who are, what I've seen, at least in my family in London, people are being made redundant, and they turn to doing sole trader stuff. They turn to, starting a little food business on the side, or, and I feel like this is a good time for those smaller accountants. Maybe they lose their bigger clients, but they're gaining a lot of people who are being like forged in fire, as they say.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because you hear stories about. I mean, I feel like nowadays you hear stories about the people who graduated during the market crash and in 2008,
Which
2009.
one?
Yeah, in 2008, 2009, and now at that time they had to survive, and in order to survive, they had to make something of their own by themselves, start their own business, and now they're the people we look up to today. So I think that they're going to have a lot of people in 10 years' time who are going to say, 2020 happened, and then I started this thing. I never thought I'd start a business, and now I'm super big.
Yeah.
And especially nowadays with the, with technology that possibly allows you to scale personalized contact. For example, GPT, that the AI that sounds like a human. It is possible for small accountancy firms, I think, maybe I'm wrong, to scale with those businesses as they grow.
Yeah.
And because for me, like, I'm like, if I don't get fined, I'm going to stay with this guy as big as I get, that's that's the way I look at it,
For
So
sure.
what do you think is the next big thing in the accounting tech space? It's not, is it fintech? Is it considered fintech?
Oh man, that's a really big question. I mean, it depends. It depends, mate. So if it kind of goes like this, like if you're looking to raise like VC money, yeah, just by all means jump on the fintech bandwagon. Fintech right now just means everything.
Yeah.
I've had people calling Pixie fintech. It breaks my heart. It's like, it's not fintech at all. It has nothing to do with fintech.
Yeah.
Productivity private software. It has nothing to do with that. But again, it just depends on the target market, I guess.
Oh, for Pixie.
Yeah. Again, honestly, I'm not sure what's next. If I'm honest with you, I'm not too much into the big things. Like I could go on a rant here about, AI is going to be a big thing. I don't think it is. I think it's going to be years away. There was a bit of a hype a few years back where it was like AI everything. Oh, AI bookkeeping, AI reporting, AI all the things. And none of that came to pass. Mostly because it's really hard to do AI where human judgment is necessary. Even the bookkeeping or what they call the ledger apps, even those, they are like tons and tons and tons of information. So they would be able to immediately just reconcile all the transactions and whatnot with just a bit of metadata, because they would be able to figure out, all right, look, this is the kind of diet. Oh, so it goes under entertainment, for example. They don't do that, dude. Everything is like a manual process because it needs to be considered in the context of that business.
Yeah.
And for my business, this kind of Diet Coke, today it's staff entertainment. But if I gave it to you, it's client entertainment, which is treated like completely different in terms of in tax terms, So it's really important to have that context. And AI, it really doesn't help there unless it observes everything, which is impossible. So yeah, that didn't come to pass.
Like, especially, you're right, there was a lot of hype over the last years. And the way I look at it is, it's a tool, right? Like, imagine the Romans were like, kept talking about hammers. We'd be thinking, okay, it's just a hammer. It's not a big deal. Like, people are talking about it as if it's going to save the whole world, but it's a tool that you use sometimes and then you don't use it most of the time. And as a technical person, if I can't debug it, I don't want to use it.
It's kind of like a black box. You just have to live with it, dude. But yeah, it's I'm sure there are very specific places where AI is going to make a ton of difference. I'm sure of that. But whether that's the next big thing for software or accountants, I am not entirely sure on that. To be honest with you, I think that the thing that might be the next thing really is whatever allows. Kind of going back to interesting. Yeah, sorry, I'm just connecting the dots here on my end. So I'm just thinking, for example, what you mentioned about 2008, 2009, businesses getting started then, and they operated like vastly different, like way more capital efficient because there was no capital around to begin with. So for now, kind of like this, I would trying to put my crystal ball in here and just trying to glimpse into it, I would say, whatever allows accountants to scale and keep their lifestyle. So scale the business, grow the business, but keep the lifestyle is potentially going to be the next thing for smaller firms. Whether that's true or not, I have no idea. But I do know that everyone's kind of aching for that. Just having more income, being able to deal with more clients without having to, work through the night. I was talking to someone today, interestingly enough, and well, as you know now, the tax filing season is coming around the corner. So what they're doing is 9 to 11. So 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. This is like their work schedule. This is brutal. Anything that comes along that helps alleviate this, I think will do really, really well. What that is, I couldn't tell you. Whether it's going to be AI or something else, I don't know, to be honest with you. And to be fair, I'm also kind of like distracted with my own thing. I spent too much time just trying to detect what the next wave is going to be, fortunately or unfortunately. I think we just stick to the fundamentals and hope that it works for us.
Totally. So you said your own thing. Are you doing something on the side with others as well?
No.
What do you think of the independent hacker movement?
I love it. I absolutely love it. Yep, absolutely love it. I think it's the best thing to happen in terms of narrative over the past 10 years, by far. I think that was a really, really needed shakeup of the entire ecosystem. I know lots of people who are in the VC business, know lots of investors. I love them dearly. I hope they are very, very successful. But it's quite disheartening to see folks who could be running their small business being turned down because their business is going to be a lifestyle business. And the lifestyle business to an investor, please understand that this is something making, $500,000, $1 million a year. This is a lot of us. Where I come from, that's a lot of money. That sustains a very good lifestyle for business owner, their team, etc. But it's not material for an investor. So from that perspective, it becomes really, really challenging. So the indie hackers coming around and going, folks like Rob Bowling and whatnot, going around saying, what, that's fine, mate. Just build your business to $250,000 to $500,000 and just run it, Or even if you want to run something on the side to just complement your income, that's fine as well. I think that's a really important mentality and a really important change of mentality as well. That said, I think that there's also a bit of I'm not sure if toxic I think toxic is too strong a word, but there's also the risk of worshiping people. So just because someone is able to pull off a job board in the beach of Thailand or something like that, it doesn't mean that everyone's going to be as lucky as that. There's a ton of luck involved in that. There's timing, there's a ton of stuff. I wouldn't really encourage anyone to try to capture that lightning again. So, again, just look around. Small businesses have lots of problems. Small niches have lots of problems. Right now, I don't know. Look, let's talk accountants, right? Something that can only be used by accountants in London. It's a small niche, but by all means, if they have a common problem, there is a business to be had there. Even if it generates like $100,000 or something like that a year. It's a valid business in my eyes, and it's definitely a valid business at the indie hacker kind of like movement. And I think that it's important for folks to be able to kind of like step into that, start small, do that thing that generates a small level of income, just enough for you to focus on it full time, or for you and a couple of other people to focus on it full time. It's never going to be like this gigantic, Uber-like thing. But to be fair, you will never have the headaches that the folks running that business will have, which is a good thing, which can be a really good thing as well. So yeah, I think it's really, really important thing for
passion. And you're seeing nowadays that, some of these gargantuan companies, it's a bit of smoke and mirrors and, speculation and a bit of hope, So, you're right. Like, you probably have the same chances of becoming Uber as you do becoming Levels.io,
Yeah, that's it.
Has to be a balance. Like, you have to figure out what you need to get to where you need to get to in your business, and then work on concentrating on that instead of the lifestyle or the aesthetics of either an Uber or a Levels.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting because once you start looking into, once you move away from the fringes. So the two ones that you mentioned from Levels and from Uber, for example, and you start moving towards the middle or the middle ground, and you start dealing with communities like the community for what's the name of that thing? Let me open my Slack because I have the name of them right there. The Microconf Connect, for example, the Microconf Connect crowd. There's a ton of businesses there that are generating 5-10 grand MRR, if that. But the community is super supportive and just achieving exactly that purpose of independence, just enough income to give you that autonomy to work on it full time without having to be concerned about things, without making ends meet, without having to become this huge business as well. And I think that that's really, really important to have, just, that urge or that group of people that are kind of like-minded and in the same journey as you are, because it kind of keeps you grounded. Again, if you're looking at Levels, you look at the guy and go oh, I want that lifestyle. I want exactly that. So yeah, I'm going to try to replicate what he has. It's not going to work. You're not that guy. You don't have his personality. You don't have his tone of voice. You don't have his properties. You don't have, there's so many things that are so unique to that specific case.
He was very early as well. He started out. He was very early for what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly.
His job board and I think Remote.io and Nomad List. These are not technically special things, but he did it at the right time. He was listening to what people needed at the time, and it worked out. Actually, John, who is the main admin on our Slack group, I met him through Nomad. The Nomad Slack.
Oh, there you go.
So
there you go.
Yeah.
I think those groups are good, in honesty. Yeah, they just simulate lots of things or make things possible.
So if you weren't in tech, what would you be doing?
I have no idea. If you asked me, literally, I remember it very distinctly. Being, I don't know if that was prep school here. It's what, sixth grade. I remember very distinctly, a teacher asking, "Hey, okay, what do you want to do for the future?" Blah blah blah. And at the time, I was already hell bent in computers. Yeah, I want to work with computers. That's great. So I honestly don't know how to do anything else. I don't know, run a beach bar somewhere maybe.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah. But, that's really the thing. I never really considered anything else, to be honest.
Perfect. Okay, so we're coming up to an hour. I didn't think this. Yeah. Amazing. I didn't think this conversation would go so long, but it's been interesting. I'll ask you a few quick round questions now.
Yeah.
What was your morning routine like pre-pandemic and now post-pandemic?
Wow.
And it's okay to say I don't have a morning routine because I wake up at 10 o'clock sometimes. So no shame.
Yeah, okay, good. You're making me sweat. You're ooh, okay, what can I make up to pretend that I wake up really early in the morning?
To make it comfortable, I'll give you mine. I wake up when I want. I take a shower, brush my teeth, and I eat, and I get to work. That's my routine.
So pre-pandemic wasn't that different. I'm not one of those folks that's able to wake up at 6 a.m. I don't know why, I never was. It's not that I go to bed late. I just don't like to get up so early. So for me, typically would go, just getting up, having a coffee, jumping on the bus, go to the working space, do my work there, and that would be my morning. Nowadays, it's not that much different. So I get up in my pajamas and do work in my pajamas until about 11 or something. And when it's time to actually take a shower because the sales calls are starting. So it's not a good thing to do in pajamas, although I have done some. I'm not going to say to who. But it's interesting. But at the same time, I'm kind of wondering, because I think that we're going to be in this for at least another year. So I'm just kind of wondering, what can I do to get out of the house in the morning? I do remember at the time I was suggesting to a friend of mine to, because they were getting really dragged down. I was just telling them, look, what you can do is do exactly the same thing as if you're going to the office and just go around the block, grab a coffee and bread, and then come back home. So it's just kind of like to do that routine there. So I may look into that myself, just to, get that change of scenery in the morning. Because to be fair, it's getting old news. It's becoming old news. There's stuff about getting up and just going straight to the computer. So I need to find a healthier habit as well.
Yeah, totally. You mentioned Score Takes Care of Itself by Bill Walsh. I put that down on my reading list. Is any other books that you recommend?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Oh, look. So the other book, interestingly enough, someone was mentioning that to me the other day. Sorry, when I say the other day, like yesterday, mentioning us like, hey, have you ever read this book? It's amazing. And I look at it and it's Crossing the Chasm by Geoff Moore. It's kind of like a marketing-ish book. I definitely recommend it. I'll tell you exactly the same thing I told them. That book is so good that it wrecked every single business book for me because it delivers so much value. It's not even funny and it costs pennies. It's definitely one of those books that I would recommend everyone to read alongside with The Score Takes Care of Itself, even though The Score Takes Care of Itself has nothing to do with business and there's nothing to do with tech. But sometimes, you get learnings from wherever they come. So
Exactly. Fun fact, my first internship, I did it with Lufthansa. And I was working with some consultants to design an algorithm. And the algorithm was based on what I used to do when I used to DJ at school. It's basically the same process for airplanes, and it worked. So yeah, you never know where you can get inspiration.
Wow, that's super random, actually.
Yeah, it was crazy. Okay, so we got, kids nowadays are, they're getting inspiration on TikTok to start their own little tiny businesses, and, a lot of investment advice there for some reason. For kids coming out and deciding whether to sit on Zoom for university or do something else with their life, what do you suggest for somebody who's trying to get into tech or start a business? You suggest like the VC route or bootstrapping, or what do you?
Sure. That's a tough question. So I'm going to go against the grain here, and I'm going to encourage everyone that can to attend university. I know it's very trendy to say, oh, it's useless. It's not useless. I didn't do it, and I did feel the lack of it. So by all means, just invest those 4 years of your life into that degree. It's definitely worthwhile. Yes, I know it's going to cost a lot of money, but it's definitely worthwhile. Or rather, it's not going to be a limiting factor, which is something that you definitely want to have over the course of a lifetime. So that would be step number one. If again, I fully understand and appreciate not everyone is in a position to be able to do so, but for those that are, please do it. Don't, drink the Peter Thiel Kool-Aid of, not attending university because it's a waste of money and blah, blah, blah. Again, outliers, okay?
You heard it here first. Stay in school. What about those who have finished university?
I love that, actually. How old are you? You're not old enough to remember that stuff. Like, stay in school, man.
Don't do tech. Stay in
school. Yeah, don't be a fool. Stay in school. That's the 80s.
What about people who are coming out of university? It's done already.
So from there, there's it just depends on everyone. It's kind of like life experience. If you have previous experience running some side projects and stuff like that, maybe the right thing for you is going to be, to start a business that you have exposure with and that that, it's going to be valid. For others, I would definitely recommend go work for someone else. Again, going against the grain here a bit, but there's definitely value in learning the trade and learning from insights from people that are senior or more senior who have been in the industry for a bit longer. Yeah, just those learnings can become quite valuable when you feel that it's the right time for you to do something. If you do decide to do something, every path is valid. And so there is no right or wrong prescription. You can try to raise money if that's your thing. You can bootstrap if that's your thing. Nowadays, I think we're all spoiled for choice, really. Whatever we decide to do, there's going to be like a support group for that as well. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Celso, for taking a whole hour out of your day to have this interview.
No worries. My pleasure, man.
And thank you for listening. Take care.
No problem at all. Thank you very much. Have a good one.
You've been listening to the Tech London Show. If you're interested in joining the community or even making an appearance on this show, make sure you join our Slack group over at techlondon.io. Till next time.